Great, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So we're now on to item 9 then, which is the HR policy amendments and contained pages 87 to 189 of your agenda pack. Councillor Sherwood to present, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can I draw members' attention to starting on page 87 of the agenda pack today, where we are looking at the changes to performance-related policies in our HR. I'm supported today by Susie Richardson, who is our HR manager, and I also have with me today Sarah Barsby as the Assistant Director, if you have any specific questions. I'm sure you've all had a chance to have a look through the suggested policy changes that we're looking at today. And in summary, we've got a suite of HR policies which have been reviewed as part of our wider plan to support the effective management of employee performance. One of the key drivers for bringing these forward now is to ensure our policies will support the council's move to more agile and flexible working practices. The policies, once approved, will be complemented by performance management training to all the council's people managers. The key changes are improved definitions of the key terms, clear expectations for conducting formal performance meetings, detailed guidance for line managers on their role and responsibilities in managing performance, and we also now have a frequently asked questions section, an initial set of questions and answers that are commonly asked of the HR team, which can be built on going forward. I refer members to the full report, Chairman, and I'm happy to take any specific questions, and also as are my HR manager and assistant director. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Councillor Sherwood. Any questions for Councillor Sherwood on that item? Councillor Hewitt, please.
Not so much a question, more of a comment. I'm always a fan in HR policies that actually promote, more than anything else, a fair balance in the relationship between employee and employer. I was intrigued. I did read them in full. There's a couple of distinctions between a 1-to-1, a 1-to-1, and a 1-to-1, which just might want to be clarified at some point. That's the kind of sad thing that I do. But I was particularly keen, particularly with agile working, there's distinction really between conduct and capability, which we absolutely have to know, particularly where our employees are not necessarily going to the office. That's a critical distinction to make. So Ian and the team, congratulations. It looks like a good suite of policies.
And Councillor Hewitt, any other questions from colleagues? No, happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move the recommendation. Option 1, Cabinet approves the proposed amendments to the performance-related policies and associated procedures.
Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. So move on to item 10 then, which is the update on the 2035 sustainability programme. Councillor Sherwood to present, please.
Thank you, Leader. If you can bear with me a second, it's a long agenda. I just need to flip through the pages. I'll be there very quickly if you can bear with me. That is what you call user error, I'm being told from my side here. So I know you can use the bottom thing to move along pages. I do know that, but I do make a concerted effort as the lead member for sustainability not to print loads of paper. So I use my iPad to make sure that everything is environmentally friendly. So if I can refer members to page 190, which is the start of the report and recommendation regarding the Council's sustainability programme, and I'd like to update Council on what we've done. Can I say, first of all, when I start this, how tremendously pleased I am with all this council has been able to achieve since we declared a climate emergency back in September 2019. I think this council was one of the first in Norfolk to recognise that sustainability and the climate agenda is enormously important to our residents and their concerns. We took a three-pillared approach where we were going to look at what the council is doing itself and supporting our communities as well. And I'm thrilled with what we have achieved so far. The report goes into great detail about some of those achievements, what we've been doing and what we will continue to do. As part of that programme, we were going to spend some 500, or we've allocated £525,000 from reserves to be broken down onto a number of projects. Those projects are listed under 1.2 from A to F. But I would like to highlight at this point the community grants under 1.4 and 1.5, where we look at some of those awards that we have given. You will have heard that we are oversubscribed with applications. We were delighted with that, and there were some really good initiatives from groups, organisations, schools, businesses across the whole of the district with what they wanted to do to make a real difference in our local community here. We were able to award grants right across the district because we had so many applications, and that was a real pleasure. And I have to say, we took a little bit longer making those awards than we would originally have hoped to do, because some of the ideas and some of the schemes that came in were so good. We wanted to give them real consideration and make sure that the projects that came forward and the ones that we were awarded are going to make a real difference. And I know I've had so many emails and thank yous, not only from those groups, but from councillors who were really pleased with those grants being awarded in their wards. For example, this week, I'll be going to Nar Valley Ward with Councillor Wilkinson to look at the awards that we've given there and the schemes that are going to be helped there. And this is just one example. So, you know, it's a really positive thing, and we're incredibly pleased to have been able to do that. The other things that we've got coming up is we have looked at renewable options for the buildings, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but also the electric vehicle charging points right across the district. So we've commissioned a piece of work to make sure that we get those in the right place, so that right across the district, residents and visitors will be able to access electrical charging points, which are a real positive, because without doubt, electric vehicles are going to be more and more prominent. And to encourage people to use them, they need to be able to know that when they visit an area, they will be able to charge. So if our towns and other areas have electrical charging points, that should encourage people to stop in those communities to charge their vehicles, to make sure that they're usable and encourage people to come to those areas. Renewable energy options for the buildings. We've commissioned the work to look at all our buildings to make sure that we've got the best solutions for those to provide renewable energy. I'm looking forward to those reports being fully developed so we can move on with that. We looked at the options as far as solar is concerned, and we will be coming forward with ideas and more work on the decision on that as we go forward. trees. Everybody has a view on trees. They're not the only option as far as making sure that the CO2 is absorbed and the carbon is absorbed. But we know that our residents are keen to plant trees. We're working with the Woodland Trust, and we will soon be able to confirm the identity of a number of sites where local residents will be able to plant trees. And the Woodland Trust have been incredibly helpful with that, and they've made sure that we've got the right sites and we'll be planting the right trees in those spots. The website has been updated, and the sustainability pages are very useful, and they can encourage people to look to see what they can do themselves, but it also keeps everybody up to date with what the council is doing for its commitment. Carbon literacy training. I think this was a key thing to understand as individuals what our own carbon footprint is. I know when I took up that challenge, it's quite surprising to see how you generate carbon yourself and what you can do about that. There's also a link on the website so that individuals and members of the public can link through and calculate their own carbon footprint so that they can adjust their the way they lead their lives so that they can reduce their carbon output. I'll stop there, Leader. I'm happy to take any other questions. There are lots of points in the report, which both myself or Greg, as my sustainability officer, will be pleased to answer. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Questions from colleagues. I've got Councillor Bambridge first, please.
Thank you, Leader. It's a comment really rather than a question. I just wanted to thank the council for the grant that they made, in particular to Ling. You made 2 grants within my rather extended ward, but the one to Ling put the last brick in the wall, as it were, on what is, I think, the most eco-friendly village hall in the district. They now are totally dependent, because you gave them the small grant, which helped them to put batteries in to store the electricity that they self-generate from that hall. So thank you for that. And I think it's a perfect example of how your eco-friendly actions help the eco-friendly actions of another element of this district. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wickerton, then Councillor Kyberg, please, then Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I endorse the report because there's a lot of good stuff in there. But I've got just a specific question, I guess. I hope it's a typo, Ian, but I noticed that Swaffham doesn't appear to be included in item 118 as far as the Woodland Trust is concerned. Is there a particular reason why trees can't be planted in Swaffham?
Not at all. Obviously, the council has looked at sites right across the district. They're not going to be in every patch and everywhere. We're trying to make sure that everywhere will have somewhere close to it. I'm going to get wrong. I may get wrong off my officers. I'm going to talk about things that are to come. But there is a substantial woodland project that we're hoping will come to fruition, which is not a million miles away from Swaffham.
Just to respond, if I may, Mr. Chair, I have actually in my home at the moment 30 trees from the Woodland Trust, which we've obtained through another angle, so to speak. So hopefully they will begin. We'll get those planted as soon as we can. Okay, I'll let you know where they are, Ian.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Kyberg, then Councillor Burt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. On the community grants, thank you from Croxton Parish Council, who've successfully bid for electric car charging points in Croxton. That's a good destination where you can park at the village hall and then walk into Thetford Forest. A lot cheaper than going to High Lodge. And closer, of course. On the subject, on 119 community tree nurseries, I would like to bring to your attention the fact that Gresson Hall Museum are establishing an exemplar community tree nursery, and it's hoped that that model will be spread out across the county and be part of the overall county scheme for tree planting. Not to any this is sort of complementary to the Woodland Trust rather than in competition. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Got sort of three questions really. It's on 1.15. You talk about the report talks about engaging with leisure centres. Perhaps we could fill out a little bit more detail on what exactly that means, because they were one of our very significant carbon emitters within the district. And then secondly, we were looking at the KPIs at overview and scrutiny previously, and that there were clearly some problems with our reporting. We haven't quite got far enough yet to actually be measuring carbon. So what's our timescale for actually coming up with something a bit more robust on actually measuring what we're doing and where we're going to? So, and in the long term, what is our pathway to get to net zero in 2035? And finally, clearly, a great deal of money is going to be needed to get us to 2035 and net zero. We have seen already today the issues around not having sufficient in the budget soon enough and how that delays things. So what is our plan for increasing the budget to actually allow us to achieve our target?
Thank you, Councillor Burt. I'll take them probably in reverse order, if I may. We were very clear when we were looking at when our target should be for achieving net zero. And we chose 2035 because we believe that that's achievable with the measures that we propose to take. So we believe that we will be able to achieve that. As far as the questions in relation to the leisure centres, I'm going to refer to Greg, if I may, and also the KPI indicators, I'll refer to Greg. I know you've put some emails in to Greg around those KPIs, and I think Greg has drafted a response or may have responded to you already, but I'll leave Greg to respond to those 2 points, if I may, please.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. On the point of KPIs, yes, Councillor, but I have responded to some of your questions like at the tail end of last week. I think to pick up on your comment, we obviously have, as an organisation, made commitment that we're going to annually publish our carbon footprint, which we see as the kind of annual report to say state of the nation. This is where we are. I think probably there are some ongoing discussions between myself and Jason and the team around what proxy measures we can use in our performance framework that will enable us to track our journey within that time, because I'm sure you appreciate producing and carbon footprint takes a substantial amount of resource that I only have one officer, so I have to manage resource appropriately. But we will look at obviously proxy measures such as how much energy, how much water, how much gas we're using as a kind of measure of that onward journey. In relation to the leisure centres, and Rihanna will jump in if I say anything I shouldn't, but we are currently working with our providers around how we can enable them to start taking actions around reducing some of their carbon footprint, and they do have some detailed plans about how they're going to do that. So we are just working that up at the minute. Obviously, as with all things, finances play into it, so there will be kind of need to look broadly with our providers and with ourselves about opportunities around grant funding and so forth as we go forward, which is why we've commissioned a piece of work looking at how we are going to address renewables at both this site and Breckland, to give us that pipeline of projects which will then deliver that almost that carbon reduction strategy that you're quite rightly asking about as we work forward to 2035.
So just to expand on that for clarity, Councillor Burt, so in regards to our leisure provision, it's PFI, has to be done in collaboration. We can't do that in isolation. We have to work with our leisure provider. In relation to KPIs, obviously they've only just gone forward to the Commission some 3 weeks ago, so we're still working through that as Mr. Pearson presented. So really looking forward to support from the Commission to make sure we get that right for the benefit of not just the council but the wider district. And in relation to budget, it's all going to be about choice. So obviously got the work of the emerging budget, which Cabinet and the Assistant Director have been working on since some June time of this year. That will then get presented to the Commission early 2022. Yes, and then it'll go for formal ratification. We are looking ahead to what the budget for 23-24 is going to look like, pending all the announcements from government around funding, which is going to impact us and district councils across the country, but it'll be down to choice. I've got Councillor Mawson, please, Councillor Wilkinson, and then Councillor Hewitt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to congratulate them on obtaining funding from the CRF fund. It talks about 2 examples of possible funding that we're going to look into. Could you expand a little bit more on how they're going to be selected?
Thank you, Councillor Morton. Greg, I'm going to ask you to do that for me, please.
Sorry, Councillor Morton, are you specifically relating to CRF? Yes. So the CRF bid is a collective bid that was put together with all of the Norfolk districts and the county council. Those two items are the substantive part of that bid. So those will be the 2 projects, and they're working up feasibility around that. Once there's more detail, I'm happy to share that more broadly, but at the minute it's just it will start a procurement process to commission those feasibility works that would then lead to further work down the line.
And I'm pleased that the lobbying of this council has done across our partners across Norfolk. We've ensured that not just the membership oversight is established, but also a political oversight board for that, Councillor Morton, so that politicians are ensuring that we're driving that agenda forward, and we're being ambitious and making sure that CRF is where we need it to be spent. And Councillor Sherwood is going to be the Breckland representative on that once the terms of reference are finally ratified. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd just like to take this opportunity quickly to thank Councillor Sherwood and his team for the funding for the green projects. They're not only green projects in Narborough, one of them, it's a health and well-being as well, for which is going to help with children as well. And I'd like to thank the Cabinet members and senior officers who are visiting Narborough this week for their valuable time. Thank you very much for that. Of the carbon footprint, I think we've got to start looking at home, looking at our own, reducing our own carbon footprint. I actually followed a 16-year-old gas guzzling, polluting Range Rover into the car park this morning. I don't think that's helping with our carbon footprint. So I believe we need to start looking at our own personal carbon footprint at home, rather than expecting, like everybody does, they're expecting the government to give them this, do this, and the council to give them this and do that. That comes after we help ourselves. And for my Swaffham colleague, we've got 105 trees going in at Narborough, which will suck a bit of carbon out of Swaffham for you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilkinson. I saw some officers and members' smiles. No, you're not all being given Teslas to get you around the district, but Councillor Wilkinson's comments are absolutely sound in his observations. Councillor Hewitt, please.
Just briefly, Chair. I mean, we have a risk of making this into a technical discussion about grants and key performance indicators and carbon calculations and carbon monitoring. I wanted to come back actually just to something that Councillor Sherwood mentioned earlier on, which was the grants, which are changing the lives of our communities and our residents, and in particular our children. Can I thank on behalf of the Primary Academy in Shipton, please, for the grant that we made to the school in Shipton that allows, and I think I quote from the head teacher, our children to continue to learn to care for their environment on their doorstep. And I think before we get too stuck in terms of measures and calculations, we need to be very clear in terms of the transformative impact that projects like this are having in our communities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, then Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you. I'd just like to sum up before I refer to the recommendation, or I'll refer to the recommendation. The recommendation is that the Cabinet note the content of this report. If my eyesight's good, that's what it says. But I'd like to conclude by saying how enormously proud I am as the lead member on sustainability that we have got as a council to where we are. We've achieved that through the support of the whole council and the council members and our local residents. I'm just delighted. We had reference earlier in an earlier debate about blah, 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 and that came from a climate activist. But in this case, it's not blah, blah, blah. The council has taken firm actions, taken firm recommendations, and will be making firm progress to achieving what our communities want. So thank you, Cabinet colleagues, and thank you to the whole council for getting this council into this position as regards sustainability. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you to Councillor Sherwood. So colleagues are to note the report under agenda item 10, which they've duly nodded and noted. Colleagues, I wish you'd indulge me that I'm going to relinquish the chair. I've got a prior engagement for the Chief Constable interview panel, which is taking place this afternoon. I hope colleagues would agree that that is an important issue for the County of Norfolk, and for the preceding items of 11 right the way through to item 17, and then further onwards, if colleagues are in agreement, to move on to item 18. Councillor Clausen, as the Deputy Chair or Vice Chair of Cabinet, will take over if colleagues are content. Thank you very much.
So I wasn't expecting that, but here we go. So we move on to item number 11, Q2 financial report. Councillor Phil Cowan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, this is the second of what will be 4 reports this year, as ever. But I just want to draw your attention to a few things. So, as we all know, councils around the country have to separate revenue and capital spend. And just as before, we have in 1.2 our revenue figures highlighted, in 1.6 our capital. And then, of course, our treasury and the treasury management, which is looked at very carefully by particularly audit committees. But in addition, this year, we have a balance sheet management, which shows up on paragraph 1.8, which has Appendix A included it. It's a new requirement for us as local authorities. So you have a report before you, which is for noting. And as I've said before on similar occasions, at the start of the year, the figures are not quite a wet finger in the air, but we don't know at the start of the year where we're going to be at the end of the year precisely. We know the direction in which we should be going. And we will always set out the previous year, our aspirations for efficiencies and the like going forward. So what I'd like to do, if you will follow me, on page 199, we have the forecast revenue outturn costs identified, and you will see that we require at the moment £398,000 from the general fund to support our revenue costs. Last report, if I remember rightly, and I'll I think it was just over 500,000. So it's going down. It will continue to go down as we finalize and define more precisely where we are in terms of our revenue needs and requirements. But I can tell you now that the forecast, and I say forecast at the moment, is that by the end of the year, we're likely to be about 250 to 300,000 required in as a support from the general fund. And in that table before you on page 199, you can see where the variances are. So our cost of services is the largest chunk effectively in that. And of course, we also show in there what we've been able to push in from reserves and where we've received funding from the government through the COVID-19 programs. If we move beyond that onto table 2, that identifies the significant variances. And it will be no surprise that the first significant variance is our housing benefit claims, which is why we're implementing things like the Elm Road project in order to be able to keep a tighter control of our housing costs in that area. But I have to say, we are forecasting, and we do know that there is likely to be an increased demand on our housing team as a result of COVID and the cessation of furlough and such like. So we are taking a very pragmatic view, looking ahead at where we might be at the end of the year. You can see that we've made just under £300,000 of efficiency savings. And there's a one-off hit that we're taking as a result of decisions made by this council that we would effectively wind up our BTS service. So that is a one-off hit on item 3 on that line. But when you take all that into consideration, that's where we get our 398,000 round figure that we need to contribute from our general fund to support the services that we provide for the residents of this district. You'll see on page 202 that we've achieved 300,000 of sort of close on 600,000 of efficiency savings. But you'll see from the commentary that we're unlikely to achieve all of those savings that we anticipated. Turning to the capital programme, one thing that as finance officers and cabinet members with finance responsibilities don't like to see are lots of carryover figures. And I've said this before, because it's often been in the past a means by which a slush fund effectively is set aside by officers to deal with things that they don't kind of know what's going to happen. This is not the case with our carry forwards on our capital programme. And the reason it's not the case is that obviously some of the work that we're carrying out, and they're big sums of money, have been delayed for one reason or another. And they're there in the capital grants and such like. And when you look at the variances, it becomes quite obvious. We've got the Thetford HIF, so we're carrying that over because we're not in a position to actually spend that money as yet, but we're certainly not going to lose it. And similarly, property reinvestment. We decided to defer any changes to that programme until next year for very good reasons. And those very good reasons are that we're coming out of COVID. We have tenants in our buildings and they're pretty well let, as you've heard before from my colleague on my right. But we want to do more with those. But we don't want to rush into it at the moment, at this moment in time. We want to preserve and protect businesses that are functioning and not put them into difficulty. And then the other big one, of course, is the Snetterton Power. And work has started on that. The substation planning application was lodged, and we're fully expecting that to start, as it says there, around January of next year. So there is a very good reason why we've got £10.5 million of carry forwards on our capital programme. It's not because we're just sticking it in our back pocket, hoping we can do something with it at some point in time. This money is committed and will be spent. And it will be spent in the ways for which it was originally sought. Our counterparty exposure on page 204 is again very good. And I have a great deal of confidence in the way our officers manage our investments. What I would say is we struggle, as most of us do, to receive any sensible return on those investments. Banks, as we know, are not very generous with accounts. Doesn't matter whether you're large or small, we don't get a great return on it. And then you will see that we have the balance sheet management, section 4. This is the new section, and it identifies some risk and identifies how we manage those risks going forward. And as it says at the bottom, the main risk is usable reserves and capital reserves. And I just want to draw your attention to the bottom one there, which is the general fund. In the past, our general fund has been significantly higher than that, and we've been able to draw on it to support and promote programs and projects that we've been undertaking as a council. It is, however, now at virtually its minimum level for us to be able to perform our duties as we're required to do by statute. So we are going to regularly monitor that. But the point of making that comment is that the drawer is effectively empty. Alison hasn't got any separate compartments in there which she can just dive into, some support programs and budgets that overrun, which is why I spoke as I did in that earlier piece about local plan review. We are at the point where we have to look at our projects and programs very carefully, manage them incredibly efficiently, and squeeze the last penny out of every bit of work we put forward. It's no longer the case that we can just open the drawer, search through it, stick our hand down the back of the sofa, and we've got a few of those upstairs, but you won't find any cash in them. This is the reality that faces this council, but it's not doom, gloom and despondency, far from it. Alison and the team, while putting together the budgets as we speak, and in the fullness of time, we'll be looking and reviewing those very carefully. And I have a lot of confidence that, notwithstanding the fact that money is now tighter than we've known it for a number of years, that we will come through this in a very positive and constructive way. So that, on page 205, concludes the report that I've asked you to note. The recommendation on page, when I get there, 190 something. Now you know the one I mean. 194. There you go. Chairman, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Cowan, even. Any questions, please? Councillor Hewitt.
Just an observation more than anything else. That was quite somber, Phil, but I acknowledge the fact that whenever you talk about money, you're pretty somber. But I also get the sense that we are not alone as a council in terms of our short to mid-term forecast position. And certainly talking to colleagues in finance areas and other councils, this situation is shared, not just in Norfolk, but actually wider afield. And so from that perspective, can I just commend you once again for putting out a sensible report. It's not exciting, but at the same time, it isn't meant to be in these times. It's got to be affordable, it has to be pragmatic, and it has to be realistic. So Phil, thank you and your team for the report.
I see no further questions, so we're happy to note the report. Nods all round, thank you. And from memory, the next item, item 12, Alison, you're going to report as Mark is not.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, yes, I'm pleased to present the Q2 performance report, which outlines the council's performance from July to September this year. As members will see, the council is still working through a difficult period in relation to the customer contact centre, but has set out positive steps and changes in the commentary for those items. Whilst performance in this area will not be an overnight fix, Members will also note the performance around environmental services, which has also been previously discussed at this committee. Whilst there is an improvement in missed bins, the council remains much higher. The council's target remains much higher than it's previously reported. This situation requires to be monitored to ensure that improvement continues. I'm now going to hand you over to Ryan, who's one of the officers, who's going to actually talk you through the specifics of this report. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Councillor. There's just 3 points which I'd just like to make briefly. This has already gone to overview and scrutiny, and those responses are going out shortly. One is on the commercial property portfolio indicator, which is marked as amber. Subsequently, we looked around the targets of that, and that we've retargeted that, so that would now be green. The reason it was previously targeted at amber is that was last looked at in 2018 target-wise. So we've really looked at that again, and obviously because the portfolio has subsequently changed in that time period, it would now qualify for green. Staff sickness is high. I'm sure members will know, obviously it's seasonal and fairly exceptional this year in relation to the sickness levels that we're going to see. And the only other one is just in relation to the major determinations for planning. Ultimately, it's a little bit disappointing that it's such a low level, but against the annual target, we're still above that. So that's just something we're monitoring to ensure that what we're looking at is just a monthly anomaly as opposed to something more significant. Obviously, have to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions on the Q2 performance? Councillor Hood.
Just a short observation, actually, Chair, which is, as at today's date, property let is at 99%. So it's improved significantly since the time of that particular report.
Well, that deserves congratulations then. Any other questions from colleagues? Any questions around the room? No? So again, the recommendation is that Cabinet note the contents of the Q2 performance report. Happy with that? Thank you, colleagues. So we move on to item 13, which is the private sector housing enforcement policy and financial penalty policy. Now, Alison, you're on home turf.
Thank
Over to
you.
you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Okay, so the private sector housing enforcement policy and the financial penalty policy, it's a mouthful. I'm very pleased to present this. This is a really good step forward. Following the restructuring of the housing service, the private sector housing team are now fully staffed and with permanent staff for the first time in many years. We've increased the grade of the team manager to attract and successfully recruit someone with an environmental health degree and a good experience of housing enforcement work. We've also included a senior private sector housing officer role and have recruited someone to this role with many years of enforcement experience. These roles are absolutely pivotal to make an improvement to our service, what we're delivering. Both have managed successful teams and now they are in post and we are able to move forward. We're putting tools in place to enable the key functions of the private sector housing service, such as these policies. The idea is to prevent, detect and control risks to the health, safety and well-being of the occupants of privately owned houses and their neighbours and reduce the adverse impact of empty and poorly maintained dwellings on neighbourhoods. Both really important things for us in Breckland and across probably the nation when we talk about it, but as I said for here. We have organised the team to give capacity following the government's rogue landlord guidance before visits are required. The team's approach to work is to work with and encourage landlords to operate legally and safely, but when they don't comply and there are clear health and safety risks, these policies, if agreed today, will enable enforcement action to be taken. We will work and continue to work to ensure that Breckland residents are able to live in suitable, safe and secure homes in line with our corporate and political policy. Today I have Jill, who is our housing manager, and Ellen, who has 24 years experience in private housing, along to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Paul.
Just an observation, Chair, having read the report with the recommendations, as Councillor Webb points out, we have, in terms of our private rented accommodation, really two main objectives. We need to make sure that our residents are safe and secure. We need to make sure that any poorly maintained or empty properties are kept to an absolute minimum. And I think this report gives a great way forward. Policy gives a great way forward whereby we can work with landlords where we can, but we have teeth when a landlord refuses to work with us. So I commend the report. Congratulations, Alison and the team.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report as I think it will help us achieve the aims that Councillor Hewitt was just describing. I'm just interested to know if we're taking on the role of licensing private accommodation, how in practice we're going to ensure we are covering all the private accommodation there is.
Yeah, at the moment, we don't have a stock condition survey, and that will be the next step, to look at the stock that we do have in Breckland, what condition it's in, and what further measures we need, such as additional or selective licensing, and also how best to target the property that's in worse condition.
Yeah, the team have nothing. They're starting afresh. It's really important that they actually get the whole structure of the portfolio of where they're going to and prioritise so they hit the ones that really need to be hit first. So, you know, this is really the starting point of getting it sorted in my world. So I hope that helps.
Any further questions? No, I want to be welcome. So would you move the recommendations, please, Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there's 3 recommendations on the report. Number 1, that the private sector housing policy is approved. Number 2, that the financial penalty policy is approved. And number 3, that delegation is given to the executive director responsible for housing in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder to amend the private sector housing enforcement policy and the financial penalty policy in line with future changes in legislation and guidance. And I propose to take them on block, please, Chairman.
Colleagues, are you happy to take those recommendations on block? Thank you. And we agree. Thank you very much indeed. So moving on to item 14, that sits with me, which is the making of the neighbourhood plan for St. Antony, which shows that work has not stopped. The only work that on the local plan that I told officers should be stopped was any abortive work. A neighbourhood plan certainly did not fall into that category. It's here when we are, yeah, it's to be welcomed, as all neighbourhood plans are to be welcomed. I don't think there's any need to debate the merits which we heard at length earlier, because those issues will stay and will remain. So are there any observations or comments from colleagues first, please? Councillor Bainbridge.
Yes, Chairman. I do think we should join in congratulating St. Antony on the work that they put into this neighbourhood plan. I was there at the start with St. Antony, and I can remember meeting them upstairs with several of our officers, although I have to say I forget the date, but it was several years ago. But I think we should congratulate and support any community that decides to go this step, and I do so congratulate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. I too would like to congratulate St. Antony. It is a mammoth amount of work for a small parish to achieve, and they've done a superb job. I have one just point of clarification, if I may. The actual document that was published on the website was has been through a number of minor changes. They are small and possibly inconsequential, but a number of typographical and formatting errors have been introduced because the PDF got modified. I understand that that was pointed out, and that an offer to make a clean copy was made, but that actually hasn't happened yet. So could I ask for clarification as to exactly which version of this neighbourhood plan that you will be voting on? And those small typographical and formatting errors, will they be fixed?
Thank you, Councillor Burt. I think we'll work on the assumption that we're working on the clean version that doesn't include the typographical or formatting errors. And of course, we'll rectify any issue and make sure that's circulated appropriately in due course, unless Andy tells me different. Okay, yeah, no, that's the case. Thank you.
Okay. So we move, oh, sorry, I did make a note of that. Councillor Borwick, sorry.
Thank you. The ward member, Helen Crane, can't be here today, so she's asked me just to read out a statement from her supporting Say Antony neighbourhood plan. And it says, as ward member, I would like to publicly acknowledge the many years of hard and committed work that the Say Antony neighbourhood plan working group have put into bringing this plan to fruition, with over 96% of the residents voting yes to the neighbourhood plan. A resident of Say Antony commented in the Village magazine regarding the plan, this is a mission not to be embarked on lightly, because if we wrote a CV for volunteer team members and advertised the posts, it would be difficult to find applicants for the jobs. It was very good that the members, the residents have stepped up, and I would like to congratulate the working group and the parish council on an outstanding accomplishment. I think that it'll make a real contribution to shape Say Antony in the future. And I would like to echo and endorse her comments as well, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
As I think we all would. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Borwick. So if we can move to the recommendations, if there are no more questions. And the recommendations to Cabinet are: one, to confirm that Say Antony's neighbourhood plan as written at the time of the referendum is made as part of the statutory development plan for Brecon Council, as required by paragraph 4A of section 38A of the 2004 Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, option 1. Recommendation 2, to publish this decision as required by paragraph 9 of section 38A 2004 Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. Recommendation 3, to advise Say Antony Parish Council and any other prescribed persons about this to meet the requirements of paragraph 10 of section 38A of the 2004 Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. And then there is a fourth recommendation, which is to council. And the fourth recommendation to council is to amend the Brecon District Policies Map to meet the requirements to paragraph 9, Town and Country, Local Planning, England Regulations 2012. I think I can take those on block, can't I? Although once the council, yeah, I'm getting nods. So I can take those on block. The first three are for us, and the other one is a recommendation to council. Could I have a show, please? That's unanimous. Thank you, and congratulations to Say Antony. So now we're on to item 15, which is Councillor Cowan to present the minutes of the Anglian Revenues and Benefits Partnership.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm here to present them, but as you will be aware, I wasn't actually at the meeting. You stood in for me at that particular meeting, but they are just for noting. And also to advise members that the members of Anglian Revenues Benefits Partnership are meeting with senior officers and senior members to look at the future of how we manage the whole process. And that is happening in the very near future. Thank you.
So colleagues, happy then to note the contents of the report. Thank you. Nods all round. Thank you very much indeed. We're speeding up a bit because item 16 is the next meeting, and to note the details of the next meeting. Item 17 is to exclude the press and public. Okay, you need me to read. My colleagues agree with that. So I will consider consider passing the following resolution, that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of schedule 12A of the Act. It's moved and agreed.